Yes, everybody. Russ the West Ham Network. Hope you are all safe and well, my friends. So, I want to talk about pre-seasons. And we're going to do a few of these, actually, sort of a Hammers history. You guys like it when I do these types of stuff. So, the idea being is sort of taking a look at some of the lesser known pre-season tours. Obviously, West Ham are due to go to the United States of America, US of A, later in a few weeks' time as part of the summer series around sort of New Jersey, Chicago, and Atlanta. And before and after, so let's go way back, because I think people assume it's a relatively modern occurrence of that sort of pre-season abroad tour, so to speak. But pre and post the Second World War, West Ham were regularly touring Europe for sort of post/pre-season friendly matches with continental opposition. But in June 1962, West Ham did something a little bit different. We tried something completely new, something groundbreaking, something pioneering, and we went to Africa. But not just a tour of Africa. This was an absolutely mammoth tour of the continent, spearheaded by the West Ham manager at the time, Ron Greenwood. There's just a picture of Africa, Ron Greenwood, and led by him, one of the Kerns, Secretary Eddie Chapman, and obviously Mr. Greenwood. Now, the squad itself that travelled on this mammoth tour was depleted. Wasn't the full squad. Bobby wasn't there. Bobby Moore was currently, at the time, was it in Chile with the World Cup squad, making his World Cup debut. Obviously, 4 years later, would have been doing something more significant with the World Cup. Hashtag just saying. We also had Phil Woosum. He was awaiting the so he didn't travel. Joe Kirkett was going to he was getting married, so he again wasn't involved in the tour. And Ron Tyndall and Geoff Hurst didn't turn up because they were playing county cricket. Yeah, Geoff Hurst, 4 years later, will be, scoring a hat-trick in the World Cup final. Was not going on the Africa post-season tour. He was playing cricket for county level at the time. So there we go. But the squad was still a strong squad. It involved the likes of Martin Peters, Ken Brown, Johnny Byrne, John Dick, Alan Seeley, Laurie Leslie, Ronnie Boyce, and they left London on June the 4th. London. After refueling, now listen, this is quite an epic journey. This is quite an epic journey, considering also it's in the 60s as well. So aircon, comfort wasn't what we're used to when we're flying. When I fly to Dubai, it's very comfortable. Wasn't the case there. They had refueling stops in Libya, where temperatures touched 93 degrees. They also had other fueling stops at Entebbe, which is in Uganda, before finally landing in Nairobi for an overnight stay. The following day, the Hammers then continued their mammoth journey with further stops in Mombasa, which the country originally was Tanganyika, and also they went to Dar es Salaam in Somaliland, which I know are both part of Tanzania, but at the time, two separate countries, before finally landing and arriving in Nyasaland, which is Malawi now. However, despite that mammoth sort of 2-day journey, Ron Greenwood's men played their first match the following day on the 6th of June and thrashed Nyasaland 4-0 thanks to goals from John Dick, 2 goals from John Dick and 1 from fellow forwards Johnny Byrne and Alan Seeley. So despite the fact that they had all this travel, they still kept a clean sheet as well, 4-0. That didn't stop. The following morning, they moved to Salisbury in southern Rhodesia, now part of Zimbabwe, of course, where they visited a tobacco factory and swimming pool before thrashing southern Rhodesia 5-0 the following day, with Malcolm Musgrove scoring 4 goals and Johnny Byrne scoring the other. So another clean sheet there. The following day, they boarded their 7th flight for a trip to Bulawayo. However, the travelling was far from over, with Greenwood and his players taking an overnight train to visit the spectacular waterfalls of Victoria. The Victoria Falls, of course, in Zimbabwe, that is, I believe. Then they took an overnight train back to Bulawayo. Then they played a game against the Queen's Ground, where they defeated South Rhodesia again, having put 5 past them a couple of days before. They then put 3 past them, 3-0 victory, with Alan Seeley scoring twice. So another clean sheet. Flight number 8 took the Hammers Johannesburg in South Africa to catch another flight to Accra in Ghana, only for an unplanned diversion to take them back to Salisbury in southern Rhodesia. And then finally from there they went to Leopoldville, which is now Kinshasa, which is the capital of Congo, and they were met with a swarm of mosquitoes. Then they went to Lagos in Nigeria, and then finally to Accra, where they were met with torrential rain and, according to reports, colourful foot-long lizards. Despite that, the Hammers dispatched Ghanaian champions Hearts Oak 4-1, with John Dick scoring twice and goals from Byrne and Ian Crawford. Then a 5-hour drive to Kumasi, where they visited a local school, before John Dick scored 2 goals and Ronnie Boyce won in a 3-0 victory over Ashanti Kotoko. This is mental. This is crazy. Then it was back on the bus for a long trip back to Accra. However, Malcolm Musgrove, John Lyle, and Bill Lansdowne laid low with a stomach bug. So 3 of them went down with a stomach bug. But after a day's recuperation on the beach and swimming in the Gulf of Guinea, Musgrove returned. He sufficiently recovered to score in a 1-1 draw with Real Republicans, who won the Ghana Premier League title the following year. Amazingly, that was not the end of this drama of a crazy African pre-season. An aborted takeoff in Lagos delayed the Hammers' departure by 12 hours before they eventually landed back in London via Lisbon, having covered 20,000 miles, playing 6 games, 5 wins, 1 draw, and 20 goals conceded in an absolute epic pre-season tour / post-season tour. What was interesting was the nucleus of that squad then went on to go into what was the golden era of West Ham, and in Ron Greenwood's autobiography, he spoke about how this trip was very much not just a team bonding trip, but for a trip for him to identify the right characters, who's got it, who's not got it, where was he? He was quoted in saying, who had humour, who had heart, and who just moaned about everything. Obviously, then we went into then you had the 64 FA Cup win, you had the 65 as well, and obviously 67, a phenomenal time in West Ham's history. Money-wise, in terms of money earned, one report from the Chronicle in South Rhodesia claimed that West Ham made £2,500 for one of the matches, with the local FA making a significant loss, even though 11,000 fans showed up. So that was for one game. So $2,500 back in the day was a lot of money. Obviously, the logistics involved in all that, plus the aborted flights, the diversions, the stomach bugs, just the sheer amount of travelling on flights. Absolutely crazy. Mental. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Something a bit different. As always, we like to bring you a little bit of history, a little bit of nuance, a little bit of history about West Ham. We've got plenty more. There's a trip in Egypt pre-season, or no, it was a during season tour trip to Egypt I want to talk about as well, which we'll probably talk about next week. But let me know in the comments below if you enjoy this type of stuff. We can do a lot more with it, and give you a lot more sort of this sort of Hammers history series. But anyway, take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay warm, stay humble, keep the faith. Much love. Bye bye.